So you've now heard of the fire and the threat the entire St. Louis region is under, if the two shall ever meet, if they haven't already. And you may be asking yourself, what can I do about it? How can I protect our children? How can we help? This next amazing woman is here to help us learn just that. While we live in this unfortunate situation, we have been absolutely blessed with someone who lived in a similar situation almost 40 years ago and prevailed. Lois Gibbs, Executive Director, Center for Health, Environment, and Justice, was not always an executive director. She was a mom, struggling to raise a family that included 2 children suffering from a variety of rare illnesses. She lived at Love Canal, a neighborhood full of toxic waste. She reached out to other residents, and through those neighbors, they developed strategies to educate and organize their community, assess the impact of the toxic waste on their health, and change corporate and government disposal policies. We had the opportunity to meet with Lois when she was scheduled to appear the last time. Unfortunately, with the unrest in Ferguson, we had to postpone, as you all know. Lois is truly committed to helping this community, which is facing one of the most contaminated sites in the country. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Ms. Lois Gibbs.
Okay, it's working. All right, so first I want to say that I established the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice after Love Canal in 1981. We work with 12,000 groups across the country. I've seen everything. This is okay, so, all right, this one's good. All right, so of all of the sites that I have visited, and I have visited tons of sites across this country in the last 33 years, this is by far the worst. I have never, ever, the idea that they are leaving people in these communities when they don't have a clue what's going to happen. You know, you go to Love Canal or you go to Times Beach, Missouri in your own backyard, you go to Pensacola, I don't know, all the sites I go to, they say, well, there's a dump here and it's got this much waste and it's moving in this direction and it poses this much risk and blah, blah, blah. They don't know here. It's terrifying to think about. At any moment, the fire can reach the radioactive material and something horrible is going to happen. At any moment, when you're sleeping, you go to sleep at night and, oh my God, what's going to happen? How do they expect families to live with that kind of unknown, terrifying fact? I mean, it does remind me, when we heard the history from our great historians here, it does remind me of when I was young, and it was a long time ago, we used to go down to the fallout shelters, right? And sometimes we would go and have to duck and cover under our desk. Never understood exactly why that was going to work, but nonetheless, but sort of like that was an unknown thing that was terrifying, but we knew what to do. Because the federal government said if you duck under your desk, you're going to be fine, and we felt good about that. They can't even tell you that here. They cannot even tell you that here. Shelter in place? Really? This is radioactive soot. It's radioactive smoke. if you have one little tiny hole in your windows or your doors or underneath your doors or your weather stripping's got a break in it or name it, it's going to get in. You can't duct tape your whole house. Although that's how my husband fixes everything, I have to say. Duct tape is his friend. Are we not using the other microphone? Can I take this one off? I'm an organizer. I just can't stand still. It's pathetic. So I think I got this one. Yeah. I can do this. All right. We will make this work. Okay, so this is, and I'm truly being honest here. I have never, ever, in my 35 years of doing this work, seen a more terrifying and dangerous sight as the sight that you all are faced with. Never. And the idea that EPA, who is a Superfund, they have control. They have the authority. They don't have control. I mean, they don't, they're just, Carl Brooks. Really? Carl Brooks told me I should only speak to truth here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to listen to Carl. Maybe the only time, but I'm going to listen to Carl. The EPA has authority. They have the authority to do anything. Under Superfund, I am the mother of Superfund. I'm the mom. It was created because of our site. I understand all the rules and all the authority under Superfund. I understand it. I was there at the table when they wrote it, and when Ronald Reagan tortured it, and then Clinton fixed it, and then someone else tortured it. But I know all the rules, and I can tell you right now, they could move every single person who wants to be moved. They can do that. And for those folks who don't want to be moved, they can give you property assurance. What does property assurance mean? That means I'm not sure I want to move. I'm just not sure. And it's okay not to be sure. My God, you live in the biggest unsured disaster area. It's fine not to be sure. But if you're not sure, they can put together what they call a property assurance program, which says, okay, you don't want to move now. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you a 3-year window. And in that 3-year window, you'll have plenty of time to think about if you want to move. And if you decide you want to move, we'll buy your house at fair market value, not at dump site value. They can do that. And actually, property assurance is really important for the seniors because it's not so easy for seniors to pack up and move. And it's the honest truth. And nobody point a finger at somebody because they're not sure. It's okay if they're not sure. And there is a plan for not being sure. And they have done this. EPA has done this at other sites. This is not a first time. It's not a new thing, right? Monitoring your health. In Tucson, Arizona, they had a clinic. Those folks were exposed to contamination in the water. TCE, it's a solvent, doesn't matter. I always say toxic is toxic. Do we really have to use all those words? Toxic is toxic is toxic is toxic. So in Tucson, Arizona, EPA, working with the health agency under Superfund, set up a health monitoring where people would go and get their blood pressure taken and their different sort of various, you know what the docs do, the blood pressure, the blood. But these docs were looking specifically for diseases related to exposure. That's what you want. You don't want just a doc who's going to say, oh, your blood pressure is fine and your cholesterol is up or down or whatever. It's a special clinic that says, these are the diseases related to your exposure. And we are going to set up a clinic that will not only just look at you from a total health perspective, but it will also look for these particular diseases that are related to exposure. This has been done. Why are they not doing it in St. Louis? Why are they not doing it in St. Louis? I'll tell you why. Because there's not enough noise. There's a heck of a lot of noise, and the Just Moms have done a great job, and the Missouri Coalition has done a great job, and the Teamsters are there, and the folks from Coldwater Creek, right? Did I get that right? I can't remember the name of your group, though. I just remember the location. I'm sorry. But people have been making noise here. But there's not enough noise. So I'm going to go back and talk to you about Love Canal and what happened there and how it's similar to here and how you can move this thing forward. So I'm going to do a little bit of talking, and then I'm going to stop talking, and then I'm going to talk. You guys are going to talk. So if you have questions or comments or clarification, so I'm not just going to talk at you and then walk away. I'm going to actually answer some questions, at least only the truthful ones, because I don't want Carl Brooks from EPA to get upset. He told me I can't talk about any myths. I think the myth is that EPA does its job, so I'm not going to talk about that. Okay, so what we do have to talk about noise, though. And we got to talk about noise and what we have to do. So I'm going to tell you about Love Canal, and everybody can look at these lists. There's a list here. It says sign the petition. It says fill out the landfill odor survey, to log on odors, to volunteer with Just Moms, write letters to the editor for the newspaper or op-ed pieces, attend the prayer vigils, comment online to news articles, make phone calls, write senators, do something, whatever you're comfortable with. Have your children. You know, like those awful days, I have 4 children. They're all grown now, thank God. And 3 of them are married. And all 4 are employed. I have got a really good family. But have your children, in those days when they're wild and they're crazy, tell them to draw pictures that you want to send to EPA. You know, they're going to draw pictures anyhow, and it gets them out of your hair, and then you have something to send. And it didn't take you anything except for stamping an envelope, all right? It's easy for the adults. Kids are doing the work. But think of things to do to turn up the noise. Okay, so let me go back to Love Canal. As I was introduced, I was just a mom. And I was living in my community. I come from a blue-collar community, not much different than this one. My daddy was a bricklayer, a union man. My mama was a stay-at-home mom with 6 kids, should have been union. And you know, when I grew up, I wanted to be just like my mom and dad. I mean, they were really good people. And so I did what we did in our community. As I graduated high school, I married my high school sweetheart. We had our first child, a little boy, Michael, and then we bought our first house in Niagara Falls, New York, and I was so excited. I got to tell you, I was so excited because my idea of the American dream was achieved at the age of 25. 25, I had a house, a picket fence, a station wagon. Those were big back then. I had cable, HBO. Internet was not in my life at the point. I had everything. My husband worked at Goodyear Chemical. He was a chemical operator, union shop, OCAW, by the way. And he was like the main man in the union, right, for his shift until we started getting involved, and then they decided that maybe he should step down. He said, fine, I can shut my wife up, you try. But at 25, I have this house. I have the American dream. That's what we're told. That's what's at stake for all of you. You know, you grew up, you did whatever you did, you got a job, you got a house, you got some kids, or not. Those people have a little more time. You guys have an extra 5 more minutes than those with kids. You invested into your family and your lives, and Republic Services is just ripping it out from underneath you, being aided and abetted by EPA. That's what this is. This is about money. They said it at the beginning. Our fellow brothers in the union said it 10 different times. This is about money. How dare they? How dare they come in knowing what they know and say somehow it's okay that this woman goes to bed at night wondering if the damn landfill's going to blow up while she's sleeping. Yep. So, at Love Canal, I was not this mouthy little girl. I was a mom. And so I had my son. He's 1 year old, perfectly healthy when we moved in. And after a short period of time, he developed asthma, epilepsy, where he had grand mal seizures. He developed a urinary tract disorder, which required 2 operations to correct. He developed a liver problem, similar to cirrhosis. I wasn't feeding him alcohol as a child, an infant. He developed an immune system problem, very similar to an HIV victim, where he had no immune system whatsoever. They couldn't even put him in the hospital because it was way too dangerous for him there. And I kept on trying to figure out what was going on because nobody told me either about the landfill 3 blocks from my home, under the elementary school that my son was attending kindergarten, and under the playground that I took my children every single day to play. No one said anything. And I kept looking for this, and my pediatrician couldn't give me any answers, and we just kept looking, and there just was nothing. I gave birth to my second child at Love Canal, Melissa, who was conceived and carried at Love Canal. And Melissa was perfectly healthy when she was born, a little smaller than she should have been, but healthy. And then in a very short period of time, Missy too got sick. So on Friday, she had these bruises on her. On Saturday, her entire body was covered with black and blue marks. And Sunday, she was just a mess. And Monday, I took her into the doctor and my pediatrician and said, I don't know what's wrong with her. She acts perfectly healthy. She's not running a fever. She's not cranky. She's eating fine. But look at her body. It's all black and blue. The pediatrician said, well, Mrs. Gibbs, this is what we're going to do. We'll take a blood sample, and you take her home, and I'll give you a call later this afternoon to find out what we find in her blood. So I said, okay. So she was a toddler. So they took a blood sample, and I went back home. And then they called me later that afternoon and said, Mrs. Gibbs, we believe that your daughter has leukemia. And here's what we need for you to do, is to pick her up, put her in your car, do not put a seat harness on her, do not bump her, do not squeeze her, because any kind of pressure on her body could cause an internal hemorrhage. And we need for you to take her to Buffalo Children's Hospital as quickly as possible. And so I got my daughter and I put her in the car. Now she's a toddler. Think about trying to keep a toddler sit still, right? All the way to Buffalo Children's Hospital, which is about 20 minutes. But I offered her an ice cream cone, so she was vested. You know, this is what we do. We offer benefits. And so anyhow, we got to Buffalo Children's Hospital, and they kind of swooped us into this sort of makeshift surgical room and put my daughter down and pulled me out of the room and said, Mrs. Gibbs, this is what we need to do to determine whether or not your daughter has leukemia. And I said, okay, what? So we have to insert a needle into her hip and withdraw some bone marrow and then look at it underneath the microscope. I said, but because her blood count is so low, we do not want to give her a heavy anesthetic. So what we would like for you to do is to go in there and calm her down and hold her down while we do this procedure. And of course, you know, everybody here who's a mom or a dad said, of course I'm going to do that. It's my little girl. And so I walked into the room, and Melissa is screaming at the top of her lungs, just screaming. And as she's screaming, because of the intensity of her screams, her nose was hemorrhaging, her gums were hemorrhaging, and the blood vessels under her skin were burst. And I looked at this, and I first started to go and try to calm Melissa down, and then I realized I couldn't do that. I couldn't be in that room. And I walked outside of that room and told her I would be back. And I stood outside that room, and I listened to my daughter screaming inside, saying, "Mama, please, Mama, they're hurting me. Please, Mama, I'll never be bad again. Please, Mama." I tell you the story not because my children suffered more than others. They did not. My children all survived. Others did not. I tell you this because while this was happening with Michael and Melissa and my neighbor's children, the city of Niagara Falls, the state of New York, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency all knew that we were being poisoned, just like they all know. We heard it. She said 1974. They know that you were being poisoned. And they made a conscious decision, deliberate decision to allow us to be poisoned. And that's what they're doing here too. They know you are being poisoned. They know that. There's no question. Are you all being poisoned at the same rate? Of course not. See, Mr. Brooks, I did it right. You're being poisoned at a different rate. But you're all being poisoned, and they know it, and they do not care. That's the bottom line. How did I find it out in Love Canal? I, like so many of you, opened up the newspaper, and I found that there was a story on Love Canal. 3 blocks from my home, 20,000 tons of chemicals, also parts of the Manhattan Project. And that it was leaking. So I went to get this report that was referred to in the newspaper. And so I went downtown and talked to the reporter who did the interview and asked him how I get a copy of the report, and he made me a copy. And I took it home, and I read it. And it was a horrible report, and I'm not going to tell you what it said in reference to the toxics and stuff. But what the back of the report said, and here's where we're talking with Republic Services, Bill Gates, and EPA. They've done this. It's in a report somewhere. I don't know if you'll see it. And I don't know that it actually exists, Mr. Brooks, but there is a report out there that's similar. And in the back of this report, what was done was what they call a cost-benefit analysis, right? So what they did, for those who don't understand this, because I didn't understand it, I thought only God could choose who lived and died, but I was wrong. Is in the back, what it said is if we were to do A, which was clean up Love Canal by putting a trench around it, a cap over it, all the details, you don't need to know that, it would cost $20 million. If we did nothing, it would cost nothing. And then they said, so that's the cost, $20 million versus these other sort of silly things they were going to do, which wouldn't have done anything in reality. So the cost is $20 million. So who benefits from the spending of $20 million? Occidental Petroleum was our polluter, by the way. And they looked at the families who lived around Love Canal. We would benefit if they cleaned it up. And they looked at how much each family brought in financially in the household. So I will explain it in reference to my household. My husband made $10,000 a year. These are $1970, guys. It was a lot of money then. I know it sounds horrible now, but it wasn't then. We had good benefits, good union job, okay? So he made $10,000 a year, so he's worth $10,000. I did not work outside of the household, so I was worth $0. My son, Michael, they assume will follow in his daddy's footsteps, so he's worth the equivalent of $10,000 a year plus an inflation factor. And they assume that Melissa would follow in her mother's footsteps, as I did my mom, and she would be worth $0. And when they looked at the 900 families around Love Canal that would have benefited from the proper cleanup, they said that we were not worth it. Now, they didn't use those words. They said that the cost exceeds the benefits. But that's translates into We were not worth it. How dare they? And that's exactly what Republic Services and Bill Gates and EPA has done in this community. They have looked at Spanish Village. They have looked at all of the surrounding neighborhoods. They have calculated what you're worth. And you know what? None of you are worth what Bill's worth. Bill Gates is worth more than you. Why should he give up his money? Why should Republic Services get off their money? When I read that, and I really was this quiet, this very quiet, sweet person. I'm still sweet, though. As long as you're not Bill Gates or Republic Services or Gina McCarthy or Mr. Brooks. So I couldn't figure out what to do, you know, because like I never had any experience. It was sort of like the folks here. It's like, well, okay, now I know this. Now what the heck do I do with it? And I went out and started knocking on doors and talking to people. And people were saying, oh, my God, I'm so glad you came here because I didn't know what to do. So everybody in this room is going to know when you leave what to do. And you need to knock on some doors and find those other folks who really want to help, but they don't know what to do. I mean, literally, this one woman said, I'm so glad you knocked on my door. I've been waiting for somebody to come to my door and tell me what to do. That's what we need to do in this community to turn up the heat. So when we started to fight Love Canal, just like you here, and thank God for Kay and Ed and folks like that who have been doing the research, we thought that all we had to do was prove that we were sick and they would do the right thing, right? That's all we had to do. So we set out to do that, goddamn. Sorry, sister. I didn't mean that. I honestly didn't mean that. Okay, so we set out to do a survey. So we did a survey. We found 56, over half of the children born at Love Canal were born with birth defects. 56% of the kids were born with birth defects, 3 ears, double rows of teeth, extra fingers, extra toes, or mentally retarded. We found an increase in urinary disease, an increase in a whole host of diseases. Women who couldn't have babies, couldn't carry babies full term. And we put that all together and we gave it to the health department because we knew if the health department saw this, if they saw this, they would do the right thing. They would evacuate us because that's what we wanted. And so we presented it to the health department and we said, here's our survey, look at this. This is what we think is going on and you could do your own survey just to verify it. And they picked up the survey and they literally threw it on the floor and said it was useless housewife data collected by people who have a vested interest in the outcome. Well, I always confuse, like, why does Republic Services stuff not about vested interest in the outcome? Or EPA study when they don't want to do anything doesn't have anything to do with a vested interest in the outcome? I mean, come on, give me a break. Well, I'm also Irish. And Irish have tempers. And so I lost it. And anyhow, long story short, they came in and they said, okay, we'll do a survey and we will show what's really going on here. So they went out and they did a survey and they came back and they said, Lois, you're going to be amazed at what we found. Just the same thing you found. Oh, really? What do you think? We were making this stuff up? I mean, like, this is horrible stuff. And so they came to our community and they stood on an elevated stage and they had their statisticians and their epidemiologists and all the other ologists that I never could pronounce. And they talked about the whole first part is, you know, how they did the study and the comparison and the power of the study and I don't know, whatever. And then they said, and now we're going to talk about our results. One of the things we found was that 56% of the children at Love Canal were born with birth defects. And we're waiting. Okay, they're going to evacuate us now. And they said, however, we do not believe that these birth defects are related to the Love Canal 20,000 tons of leaking chemicals into their homes. What do you believe it's related to? We believe that this is a random clustering of genetically defected people. Now, you all just had a health study come out that talked about the cancer rate and the childhood cancer rate in this community. That is horrible. It is horrible. That's not genetics. That's not smoking. That's not drinking. That's not all the other things. Because you know what? The numbers they compared it to also smoked and drank and did all the other things, ate at McDonald's or whatever the nasty is that they dismiss these things on. Your numbers are huge. Your numbers are frightening, terrifying. Breast cancer, childhood brain cancer, they know it, just like they knew it at Love Canal and all these other sites. They know what's going on here, and they're choosing, because they feel that you're not worth it, to move. They're making a deliberate decision to allow you to continue to get cancer, your children to continue to get cancer, to continue to get all the other diseases that were in there. They're making that decision. They don't have the right to do that. Only God has the right to do that. They do not have that right. Okay, so we decided doing health stuff is not going to work. So what we really needed to do was go and find a good lawyer, right? It's America. Everybody sues everybody about everything. So we figured it has to be illegal to poison people. I mean, right? I mean, if I went and put poison in your drink, your coffee out there when you were doing lunch, and you died, I'd go to jail, right? Not if Republic Services does it. Nope, they're okay. It is not illegal for them to poison people, as long as they poison you with a little bit at a little time. So as long as you're only exposed to this level over your lifetime, because I always use a lifetime measurement, except for lifetime in this community has gone really less than what norm is. As long as you're only exposed to this much over your lifetime, it's okay. It's legal. I don't know how that law came to be. I don't know why that is acceptable to anybody. Certainly the workers understand this, because they get those things in the plants and in the factories and on the streets everywhere. It is not illegal to do what they're doing to you. Imagine that in America. I'm a patriot. I love my country. But my country, I don't understand how they allowed this to happen. Okay, so skipping forward, what we realized is that we needed to turn up the heat politically. This is a political fight. It's not a fact fight. The facts are there. There's enough facts to convince anybody of anything. It's not a legal fight, because actually it's perfectly legal to poison people as long as you do a cost-benefit analysis and you show the world that they're not really worth anything anyhow. It's a political fight. And a political fight means that you need more voices. You need louder voices. You need to think out of the box. You need to go stand with the nuns when they're praying on Wednesdays. It means you need to go, oh, you took my thing slid off. All right, wait. I have good notes, right? It means you need to do all of these things. It means you got to stand up. It means you got to get involved in politics. It means you got to go find those people who are voting no. It means we all need to go visit Bill Gates. It means we have to, right? It is a political fight, and it's very uncomfortable. I never thought I would see myself carrying a poster sign, but there I was. I never thought I would get arrested for civil disobedience. That means standing in front of a school bus. I wouldn't let a school bus go near the site. A school bus. It's like, why is that civil disobedience? That's like health and safety 101, right? And so they put me in jail. And I have to tell you, it was the best experience of my life. Why? It was the first time I could nap during the day. If you're an organizer and they put you in jail, they don't put you in with the rest of them because you're an organizer, right? They don't want you to organize. So they put you in a cell by yourself, and you can lay down and take a nap, and it's great. And, you know, all your friends out there will bail you out. Don't worry about it. Just take a nap, sit back, relax. I always carry a deck of cards. I have one in my purse now, and a book, because sometimes I don't feel like sleeping because I'm too angry. And so if I go to jail, I'll play solitaire and read my book. But the kids aren't bothering you. The husband ain't bothering you. The activists aren't saying, did you make your calls today? You're sleeping. It's wonderful. It's not a bad experience. Think about it. But I never thought I was going to do that stuff. And now I really don't mind getting arrested. I like getting a nap. So it's really hard to make that leap. It's very hard to be, even writing letters to the editor or to the governor, you're going to word it perfectly. People sweat over these things. Don't bother sweating over them. Just write the note on a 3x5 card. Dear Bill Gates, use your power of vote to get Republic to clean this up. Not clean it up like everybody's talking about. Dig it up, take it out, do it with St. Louis Corps of Engineers, do it right. Don't leave it in here and monitor it for 17 more generations. You can do this. Now, EPA has evacuated 250 families in Pensacola, Florida. It can be done. They go after Republic to get their money back. Because we know who's responsible here. It's not a secret. Republic Services is responsible. So EPA can use the Superfund money and evacuate all the families who need to leave, who want to leave. EPA can also do the property assurance. They can also do the monitoring. They just need the pressure to do it. EPA evacuated Times Beach, Missouri under Superfund. EPA evacuated Pitcher, Oklahoma, $48 million under Superfund. You wouldn't be the first. You likely are not going to be the last. This can be done. But it's not going to be done if you try to go through Carl Brooks, because with all due respect to the man, he hasn't got the power. The power is in Washington, D.C. The power is in telling our story to CBS News or 60 Minutes. The power is getting your voices out there and asking for other support. Love Canal could not have won it on our own. It was people across the country and our union brothers and sisters who helped us to elevate the fight, and that's what you guys got to do. You've got to elevate this fight. And I know it's really hard now because I've been trying to get reporters to cover this story, and they keep saying there's only one story in St. Louis, and that's Ferguson. And I get that. But Ferguson isn't going on forever. And if enough people are writing Good Morning America, the Today Show, they all have Facebook sites, they all have websites. Get your voices out there, tell your stories. Don't worry about the wording and whether it makes any sense. I am the world's worst writer, and my writing program underlines all the misspelled words, which is about 90% of them. And then I just do autocorrect. And sometimes it's funky, but it always works in the end, because it's really the less sophisticated you write, the more they think you're real. And it adds value when you're writing from your heart and you're writing from what you know and using language that is your language in your family culture or in your community culture. So that's what you need to do. There's plenty of ways to protest. I was working with Just Moms to put together the petition for Bill Gates. We have over 1,000 signatures on it. Guys, we need like 10,000. I don't know how you get 10,000. Our brothers and sisters in the Teamsters and other unions are helping us, but everybody's got somebody that they can add a couple signatures to that petition. Bill Gates is not going to pay attention to it with 1,000. All you techie, especially you young folks, all you techie people, I don't know where Techie World is. I know there's Wired Magazine. Wired Magazine has a comment thing. Let's all start putting comments into Wired Magazine. W-I-R-E-D, because I have this weird accent. D's kind of fall away. So there's a little thing where you can do that. Bill Gates does not want to be talked about in Wired Magazine. Nasty. Bill Gates is killing our children. Why is he killing our children? Because he won't get Republic to vote. Bill Gates is a nice guy. His wife is a nice person. They gave all this money. They're very generous. We don't need to necessarily attack him in being a scumbag we're just going to attack him and say he's not using the power, and therefore he's responsible for the death of our children. Because I think flip to that would probably be counterproductive. There's a lot of things you can do. I'm here to help you. I'll help. We've written a letter to Gina McCarthy at EPA and asked for a meeting. She asked Carl Brooks to respond to that, and he said that he just wants me to tell truths and not miss, and he would be happy to let me know what's happening at this site 2 weeks after the meeting here. So I don't know how that's going to be helpful. So I wrote a letter back to Gina saying, this is not working. This is an offensive letter. He's telling me about Superfund. I know about Superfund. And I want to meet with you. So we're hopefully going to be able to send a delegation to Washington, D.C. to meet with Gina McCarthy at EPA. Gates has a foundation office down there as well. We could do that. Your congressional district people, even the ones that support you, it is not a bad idea to meet with them in D.C. if you go to D.C. and show your colors. So there's a lot of things you can do, but you got to do something. The noise level is coming up, but it's not at the peak in which EPA is prepared to act. And you want to try and do it this year or the beginning of next year to win these goals, including the cleanup. Because then you have 2016 election and nobody's touching anything, right? It doesn't mean we can't. It just makes it harder. Pensacola, Florida got evacuated because Bill Clinton was running for office. It was his second run. He was losing Florida. He was losing the black vote. He was very nervous. We put a full-page ad in USA Today when Hillary Clinton was visiting the community, the African-American community, to do the bidding for Bill. And we presented it to her in front of the news media, and said, the full-page ad said, President Clinton, put your actions where your voice is, or something like that, and move the people in Pensacola. That made front-page news all across Florida. Clinton is sweating Florida, man. He's going to lose Florida. If he loses Florida, he's going to whatever. It's all this politics stuff, right? We gave him the ad on Saturday at an event. On Wednesday, the families were relocated. Nothing changed between Saturday and Wednesday. There were no new studies came out. No new people died. No new evaporation of chemicals happened. It was political. And I tell you the story because that's what we need to do. I don't know that we necessarily have to put a full-page ad in any newspaper, but that's what you need to do. You have to stop thinking of this as a technical fight or a legal fight and start thinking about it as a political fight, because that's where we're at. So I'm going to stop on that note, and I have a few more minutes, so I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all have. Yes, ma'am.
We've tried to get 60 Minutes and all them to respond to us by sending mass emails to them. They won't respond. How can we get them involved? How can we get it nationally out there?
I think what we have to do is put together a plan. So who knows somebody at 60 Minutes? I think writing letters is not enough. I think taking like 1 minute video of Dawn, 1 minute video of someone else from the other communities and saying, this is our story, very succinct, and then send it to them. And because what they do is they do stories, right? 60 Minutes used to actually be investigative, but they're not anymore. They're really doing fluff stories, kind of human interest stories. And so, there's a strategy to each one. So just sending a note saying to do that is not going to be enough. And I was talking with Mateo and the Just Moms about we can come back and talk about how to do framing and messaging and communications, because I do that workshop and usually folks are able to figure it out when it's all over. But you have to think of the media. Who is the media and what appeals? And then after you send your story, then you do the thing. Did you see the story? Did you see the Just Mom story? Did you see it? Let me know and at least if they don't respond, out of curiosity, they're going to check out the story, right? And they saw it and they decided they weren't going to use it, but for whatever reason. Yes?
A simple-minded idea, and we can call this the cancer cluster. Now, there are other diseases involved,
So I don't know, folks in the back, let me repeat the question for those. The question is maybe to use the idea of calling this area a cancer cluster and using that to get the media attention, because it did. In Woburn, Massachusetts had a childhood, there was civil action, thank you. Civil action, and John Travolta played in the movie, and the book actually was fabulous. So that's an idea that we should put in the hat and really think about, Yeah, it's simple.
How do we make the language twist? They've spent all these millions of dollars starting up a coalition to keep us safe, to talk about how dangerous it is to move radioactive materials across the state, which, I think Ameren UE would be interested in, since they transport radioactive materials across the state every day. These multi-billion-dollar companies playing with marketing, and they have instant access to the Post-Dispatch, for example. They get an article published as soon as they write it. How do we turn that on its head? How do we embarrass people?
I was actually suggesting that you guys bring in the Yes Men. I don't know if folks know who the Yes Men are, but they would be really great, because what they do is they play on things. So there's actually an ad that's running, and I think it's Chevron, but it can't be, it's not necessarily right. But anyhow, and what they did is they found the eye stalk that they used to show all their workers together, and then they show how they painted 3 of the faces so they were black for their advertising, and it was hysterical. I mean, they just, if you don't know who they are, they're really kind of funny. Just Google them and check them out. They do funny skits. The answer is that, well, there's actually 2 answers. One is every time we respond and use their words, we're repeating their message. So we have to be very careful about how we respond. So a lot of people will say, I can't believe EPA said it was safe here. You just repeated their message, right? And it's the same with the coalition for it's safer or whatever it is. So I think it's a strategy that you really need to think through. How do you deal with that? I don't think there's a quick answer to it, but it can be dealt with. You could also make fun of it. I mean, the thing that's really funny is if you were to take their banner and you would have like weird faces and and then it goes viral. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. Them getting to the dispatch, if they paid for the ad, there's nothing we can do. If St. Louis Dispatch is running more articles that favor one side than the other, and that's also true of our side, mind you, then you should go sit down and meet with the editorial board and ask them what's going on. Sometimes it's the editorial board who's the problem. Sometimes it's actually the reporter who's the problem. And so there's also a strategy to get that. And if they're not covering your story at all, which is not true in the Dispatch, because I've seen some stories, but if other papers are not covering your story at all, stopping your subscription is not going to be helpful because they don't care. They get their money from advertising. So what you do is you go on Thursday and find 3 of their biggest advertisers, and you go to the advertisers and say, we're really angry, and if Home Depot continues to advertise here, we may not shop here. So we would like you to write this letter to whatever the newspaper's name is and tell them to stop doing one-sided coverage. So there are some strategies like that, but it really would take sitting down and thinking about who's where and figuring it out.
They're not bulletproof. I mean, for one thing, we easily found out that the coalition to keep it safe, the head of that is a grade school friend of Russ Mackey, who happens to run for public services.
But that's great for us in this
PR.
room. We gotta
But I
get
mean,
that
no,
out.
but that's the type of stuff you need to be showing, that he's gonna run back to his mother, who was on the first coalition of Let's Say, and his high school and grade school sweetheart. That's the funniness. So
Right.
I think we expose that kind of stuff.
Well, you can. Well, that's what I'm saying. Make a cartoon out of it. So, here's this, and Mama, what do I do now? That you really think about. And humor is actually really important in these fights. So much of these fights are sad and tragic, and it's our friends and our neighbors who are sick and people who are just stressed and can't go to another meeting. And it's, laughter and fun is, so you just make fun of it, and that's what you have to do in the analysis, is figure out that analysis, and then how do we make fun of it? And the thing about if you can make fun of it and you can do it in a graphic way as well as a verbal way, it will carry all over. And you put it in Google, and every time they look up the name of this thing, that's going to come up, but so is your graphic going to come up, right? In a Google search.
One of those
Yeah. There's a million ways to do it, but you don't want to just go off half-cocked and do something. You really need to sit down and figure out who, what, where, and when, and there's just a limited amount of people to do this work, too. Is anybody good at graphic art? Woo! So you have this little thing you need to put, I can help with graphic arts. If people can help with tweets, if people can help with other electronic things, that would be great. For the young people in the audience, there's a lot of regular people in the audience, but all the young people, the children, could start Just Kids, STL, right? And have your own meetings and do your own things, and that's huge. Take it to school. Take it wherever. It's another way to educate people. It's another way to move politicians when the children have their own group and they're worried about this. And again, kids can't be real negative, especially in school, because that's a problem with the school system. So we should get together and try and figure out that. That is a really good question. Yes, sir. That's an important question, and that's what Ed's going to talk about. He's going to cover that in the next thing. Yeah. But I will say, regardless of the calendar timeline based on EPA and Republic Services and all the others, there is this question of when is the fire going to reach the radioactive material? And when that happens, what do you do? And sheltering in place is not, yes, if it happened right now, that's exactly the right answer. But sheltering in place cannot be the solution. That would be a good video.
Sheltering in place, the duck and cover and all that.
A video would be great. So at Love Canal, there wasn't a sense of urgency within the agencies, and we said, well, yeah, they were going to go in and dig this trench around Love Canal. That's actually what they ended up doing. So when stuff moved out of the canal, it would be caught in the ditch and pumped out, and I'm not going to go into any more detail than that. But so you're going to dig a ditch? Are you crazy? You can't dig a ditch. We don't know what's going to happen. So then we asked them to put a bus on every corner for evacuation. Then we asked them to pay for a person that we hire, the community hires, Love Canal Homeowner Association, who will stand on site in full moon gear, with the ability to blow the whistle, meaning all work stops and evacuation happens. Our guy, not their guy. They agreed to it. It was like hysterical. It was so funny. We don't think there's a problem, but we'll agree to it. So then they put all the buses in our neighborhood, right? And we said, well, we should have a practice run. And they're like, what? I said, no, let's do a practice run. So we blew the whistle, and then the buses were all there, but they missed people. And so where they missed people, those people just laid down. So, and we had the cameras around, and like these people had died, and these other people got, and the thing that happened, and the reason we did this was, it was fun too, but the reason we did this was because they kept saying there wasn't a danger. So all of a sudden, it's like, if there's not a danger, Why are there buses on every corner? Why is there a man ready to pull the whistle? Why is it that you did a practice evacuation? If it's not dangerous, then why did you do that? And they're like, oh. So in the public's view, it's dangerous because they have buses and they have evacuation. They have a guy who's going to pull the whistle. And that's another way. You all know it's dangerous or you wouldn't be here today. I get that. But some people out there actually believe the rhetoric they hear. Part of it is that it's too frightening for them. It's just too darn scary. And that's okay. I mean, we got to help them. But this is a way, you know, these are what we call tactics that we use to help people understand how dangerous it is. And you know, then we ask them to get rid of the buses afterwards, after all, because diesel buses running 24 hours on your corner was really nasty in so many ways. So you know, there are tactics and things like that you can do that will draw the attention of other people. But this is all about strategy and strategic planning and how you're going to do it. And you really need to sit down. But Just Moms already have a lot of that done, and so does the Missouri Environmental Coalition. I keep messing it up, I'm sorry. And the Teamsters. So you know, let's use what they have, and let's just keep on plotting and planning and try to do it methodically so that we can get the most. Yes, ma'am.
What are some other things that you did back in the 70s that we should not even consider because they would be totally ridiculous now?
The one thing I would have you never consider, not because it would be ridiculous, because you would go to prison, not jail, is holding EPA hostage. Well, EPA said it was safe to live at Love Canal. And we said, well, okay, if it's so safe to live at Love Canal, you two fellows are going to live here until we're out. And we shut them in the house, and 350 people sat down around the house. We had no weapons. We were peaceful. We do not believe in violence. We sat down and said, we're not letting them go. Held them for 5 hours, and then we did let them go after all. But this is the power of democracy. I totally believe in our democracy. So here's what happened that's important about that story, not the fun part, which actually wasn't fun at the time. It was quite frightening, is that when we let them go 5 hours later, and I'd be happy during the break to share the story with other folks, the longer version, we gave President Carter an ultimatum. We said, we're going to let these fellows go, but if we don't get relocation Wednesday at noon, this will look like, we're all housewives, so bear with us, this will look like a Sesame Street picnic to what we're going to do Wednesday at noon. And because it was a first domestic hostage holding by women, housewives, the story went nationwide, and then there was the clock. You know how the media says, 12 more days, 11 more days. 3. So the national media covered the story as they counted down till Wednesday at noon. And precisely Wednesday at noon, the White House called our volunteer office and said, everyone can leave temporarily until we secure the resources for permanent relocation, but permanent relocation is our goal. So it's about democracy and talking to people. We were 500 people, and I told you my husband made 10,000. I didn't go to college. This is not a brain thing. This is about how do you do it? How do you do it peacefully? Because peacefully is really important. And how do you do it in a way that frames your issue? Where mom's sitting there holding these fellas, you know, with oatmeal cookies. You know, it was ma and apple pie, and that's the real important thing. But other than that, I don't, you know, most everything is still good. It's all still good. Yes?
Yes, you mentioned your homeowners association. Were they pretty much 100% in this, or was it just some of you? Because I see that as like Spanish Village, many of them feel this way. Others are like, I don't want to get involved,
Mm-hmm.
and others, the landfill used money to appease some of them, the divide and conquer.
Yeah.
So what kind of support did you have?
We actually had a vast majority of our community supporting us. Most of them were chemical workers. And because they're chemical workers, thanks to the union, actually, They got chemical information, so they understood more than any of the agency what the risks were, because they're working in the plant with many of these chemicals. So it wasn't hard to convince them it was dangerous. There were some people who felt that it was a jobs issue because the industry kept coming at them. You know, sort of like the fellows out in the parking lot when they're coming in. I don't know if everybody saw them, but they were from Republic, and they said, we're going to lose our job. And that was the same tactic they used at Love Canal. And in fact, Occidental Petroleum has expanded and expanded and expanded. So it was a false threat. But some of the people believed it. And what we felt is that if people aren't with us now, don't attack them, just move on. And sometimes they'll come around. But if once you attack them or push them to the point where they feel attacked, even if you don't intend to do that, you're going to lose them forever. And a lot of it is they're just frightened. It's like, what does that mean? So if I live in Spanish Village, I'd be terrified. And if she came and talked to me about this, I would join her, because that's who I am. But I could also see people, and they were in my community, saying, I just can't handle that. You know, I don't have anywhere to go, and every single night I'm going to kiss my baby goodnight and know that I'm putting him in danger. How do you get your arms around that? And that's what you really have to think about. You know, I raised my children, I'm sorry I moved here, is how people feel, and that guilt immobilizes a lot of people. But when you find a way for them to get involved, then they become some of your best supporters. So most people will come around. We had 2 groups. We actually had 3 groups, because what the state tried to do is we had an African-American, primarily African-American townhouse for low-wealth families who all had to have 5 children to get in there. Imagine that. And what they said is they tried to make it a black-white issue. And Sarah from Griffin Manor and I sat down and said, let's not let them get away with that. And so we had Sarah's group and our group, and we met all the time. But we had the separate groups, right? And then we had the people who didn't want to leave. And that was really sort of nipping that in the bud, because they wanted to make it a black-white issue and divide us, because, you know, 240 people lived in that housing with 5 children each. So that was a huge population that we wanted to make sure was relocated as well. And they would have preferred to leave them alone.
If that fire hits a radioactive waste, it's going to be a regional issue quick.
Yeah.
So the practice should include shutting down the drinking water
Right.
intakes. It should include U City being evacuated. We really should get into this and talk about what it really means
Yep.
about practicing following what the EPA is saying.
Yep.
Shelter in place.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, the emergency response, and I know that Just Moms held a meeting where they had some folks come out and talk about this, and we're doing the best they could. But that was just like an immediate response, like what do you do the first 2 minutes? It wasn't what do you do in the next 24 hours. And to really, I mean, that's another sort of tactical thing, is to bring these folks together and say, what do we do? And if the wind there's some normal wind pattern at some level of speed and blah, blah direction, you know, what does that look like? And do the plume map. And how far out. And so there's a lot of that thing you can do, and you can show people how they're in the plume. And we did have one of those sort of maps up there, although if I lived in this community, because I'm like directionally challenged, I would have no clue which dot belonged to me. So I think you have to make it really, really clear. So where is Matei? How much time do we have? You're the timekeeper. Did you forget? 10 minutes? Okay. Okay, so we have 10 to 15, and then we're taking a break because I know everybody's ready. I can't even believe they did this after lunch. They should have done it in the morning and then served you all lunch. Go ahead. Okay, so I can't answer that question. 6 miles?
6 to 10 miles.
6 to 10 miles radius if it hits the nuclear waste and becomes airborne.
I think we can give some feedback on that from the cold water treatment group.
So-
So we will, just real quick, it was the particulate size just from the piles of dust. We were told by a meteorologist, conservatively, just the specks of dust, no smoke, that a radius that for the wind, and we have all the wind patterns, guys, because we're right next to the airport. So unfortunately, that's a benefit because they've been tracking that. And they
Right.
can tell us. Conservatively, dust particles can travel about a 7-mile radius. So now include the smoke to that, we're looking more at like a 10-mile radius around wherever it would occur.
So if you're doing your emergency plan, it's a 10-mile radius, and just imagine dropping off a flyer 10 and saying you're within the radius. Right, call this number or join our Facebook. Yes, yes. I hope everybody joined Just Moms, by the way, because yeah. Right here, yes, you want to join because, you know, how big Just Moms is matters politically. Who do you represent? How many people are joining your group? So Just Moms doesn't cost you anything, although giving a $5 donation would be helpful. Go ahead.
Before everybody leaves, I know some of the moms, my daughter, they're getting on Twitter. I've been following a lot of the protesting and artists on Twitter. All need to get on Twitter. They're covering so much space. And what if we did something like West Lake Landfill fun fact number 2? Like every day put out a West Lake fun fact. And if everybody gets their friends to follow me on Twitter, this will take off.
Yep, it's a very good strategy. So people who
Does Ladue have its duct tape yet?
we've gone from ducking under our desk to duct taping our lives. No. Yeah, I'm 63 and I don't do it. But I have an intern who spends all day tweeting. That's what she does. That's all she can do. Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's a good strategy and I think people should. But again, it's about putting together a strategic plan for communications. While you don't have one now, just do it. You know, as Nike says, just do it. I mean, that's, you know, tweet and there's all of these moms, I mean, they fill up my inbox every day at least twice because they're doing a lot of that. And it's really important to do that, and I'm not making fun. I'm actually saying it's really good. So you, and then you?
I'd like to hear your comment, some of the pushback I hear. You're going to get sued. The public's going to come after you. Bill Gates is going to come after you. Why do you put yourself out there to get sued? That's
Let 'em
one.
come.
The other comment, in the Bridgeton community, I think we have a large population. They don't want to see their property values go down. And they don't want to talk about it because that means their property
Right.
values go down.
Those are two very good things. Yeah. So if somebody said I'm going to get sued, the Republic is not going to sue you, Gates is not going to sue you. If you call them something that they're not, right? So, or accuse them of doing something they're not. So, for example, you know, Bill Gates, I can't even think of something. Yeah, you don't want to say something that's wrong or you believe to be wrong, but if you believe it to be true, then you're fine. And Bill Gates is not going to come. Do you know what kind of bad media that would be? Bill Gates went to Just Moms and sued this lady because she said he was a creep. You know, that's not going to happen. You know, and Republic is not going to sue you either. Republic's already in litigation with so many people. They're not going to sue you. Let them try. There are things called strategical. They're called SLAPs for shorthand, which is strategic lawsuits against public participation. And industries have tried to do that, and the citizens win every single time. And for example, there was a couple in Texas who were fighting a landfill, and the company there sued them for slander. And so they went to court, and he goes, well, what was the case? Well, the case was his wife kept on calling the dump a dump, and he kept calling the dump a dump, but it's actually a landfill, so that's slander, because a dump is a dump and a landfill is a landfill, right? So that got thrown out. And then the second one that this guy sued against this couple, strategic lawsuit against public participation, it's the tactic the industry uses, was that he got sued for failing to control his wife. So, needless to say, that one got thrown out. So I'm not going to tell you that they're not going to do a strategic lawsuit against public participation, but they're not serious. And I think there's enough lawyers in this room, or no lawyers, who could help you if that was to happen, so I wouldn't worry about it. I would just be as honest as you can. I don't think people should make things up. I don't think people should call people names that aren't true. The truth is, Republic Services is responsible for this. They have legal responsibility. Children have died. Those are truths. And it's their responsibility to pay to get the St. Louis Corps of Engineers to dig it up and take it out. Period. That's a truth. Yeah, that's a truth.
If I could, and I would say, I would tell the folks at Bridgeton, and I understand exactly, I thought that, and I understand exactly where you're going with that. It was a great question. I would say to them, if there's a poof of smoke over there, it don't matter. Your land's not going to be worth a damn no way, okay? Your home's not going to be worth anything. Get in, let's just fight. Let's get it out of here so you can maintain your property values and see them go up. I would go back on that end of it.
Yep.
Cleaning up, there's no problem.
Right.
Yeah.
No problem, right.
And that's the whole thing with the property assurance, too. So, on one hand, all the homes that they buy out in Spanish Village or in different parts of Bridgeton, they could resell them if they cleaned it up. It's not a total loss. I mean, they have that ability. The other thing I would say is every time there is a negative out there, you need to flip it on your head, like he was saying. So when they said you're really hurting property values, you should go out the door. Your flyer should say, we're about protecting property values. We want this place cleaned up. So if you are getting the same feedback from people of why they're not going to play, write it down, and your next flyer should take that feedback and not defend it, just say, we're about that. We're about protecting property values. We are about, and make it positive. People want to join positive things and be part of things that are not just negative. So that's a good way to do it. And I think that your next flyer, or maybe Just Moms have already done this, and I apologize if I haven't seen it. But if you go out that door there's a whole list of things that have already been accomplished by this organization, which is just extraordinary. And so, to talk to them about, don't worry about property values, we're about that, and we've already done all these other things. So people should get little kind of like cliff notes on the victories you had to show how powerful you have been, and you can accomplish those sort of things. So, one more question, and then we.
Should Republic abandon their landfills and transfer operations? Is that an advantage or disadvantage as far as quicker remediation?
Republic should clean up their mess. They own it. They need to clean it up. The quickest way to get Republic to clean up their mess and do it right is to get EPA to agree for it. Because EPA is going to sue Republic to get their money back. That's not Superfund was created for abandoned sites where there's no responsible party that they can sue. They've gone out of business or whatever. Trust me, Republic Services ain't going out of business any day soon. So the quickest way to get that cleaned up and cleaned up right is actually, if Republic Services does it, which I doubt they're going to because their shareholders won't let them. Bill Gates, one of them. Or to get EPA. I mean, EPA can do this tomorrow. He can evacuate the folks who want to leave. They can do property assurance for those who want to stay or aren't sure what they want to do. They can do the monitoring, and they can contract without a congressional movement, which is what they're saying. They can contract with the St. Louis Corps of Engineers to dig it up and take it out. And that's the other thing. You guys keep talking about all this language about stuff. It makes me crazy. I hate language about stuff. That what you want is you want them to dig it up and take it out right. And then let Ed fill in the St. Louis Corps of Engineers. Because people don't know who the Corps engineer is. When you're talking to the public, not people in this room, but outside this room, we want evacuation, we want health monitoring, we want our property to be assured that we could sell it when we need to, if we have to move, if something, and we want them to dig it up and take it out and do it right. And so those are sort of the key things you might want to think about when you're talking about this issue. You know, don't talk about foos rap and don't talk about all this other stuff, because the public's eyes just glaze over when you say that. You got to talk like you're talking to not your mother, your grandmother, because your mother knows this. So I'm going to stop there. We're on a break, and I'm going to give this to Karen. Thank you.